Well, it is that time of year. Ski resorts are now starting to open across the country, and enthusiasts are hitting those beautiful white powdery slopes. Whether you're a beginner or you enjoy the Black Diamond, maybe somewhere in between, there are some common sense tips that can keep you having fun and staying safe. Joining us today is Ken Howard, who is the VP Safety Officer with the Canadian Ski Patrol. Thank you for joining us, Ken.
Thank you. Welcome for having me.
And so before we started the interview, we were chatting about the ski hill in Whitehorse. So it is end of November. What's your ski base like there? Or the snow base, I should say.
It's we don't have a whole lot of snow this year with light flurries, but we've been able to make lots of snow with the cold temperatures up there. So the base is fairly reasonable right now. Like, we do have teams up there training. So we have 2 or 3 runs that are skiable at this time, and then the other one should be open by this weekend for the general public.
Well, that's always a great day, opening day at the ski hill. Let's start things off with, tell us about the Canadian Ski Patrol and what the organization does.
We're a nonprofit organization, and we're all a volunteer base, and all across Canada that we patrol at ski resorts across Canada. Providing first aid to the injured people on the hill. On top of that, we're also doing a lot more non-skiing events. So we do summer events. So there could be anywhere from concerts to bike races to marathons, and a lot of non-skiing events as well. So we're going basically year-round now with a lot of volunteer hours and first aid out there for different venues.
Well, that sounds like a great service for Canadians. Thinking of this ski sport, what are maybe the most important things that we should keep in mind when we're participating in these winter activities like skiing and snowboarding?
When you're first going out, you should make sure that the gear that you are wearing or going to be using fits you properly on that part, as well that's in good repair. We've had some people coming out that's kind of haven't skied for quite a few years, and they pull out the old skis from the basement or snowboards, and the plastic does deteriorate over time or becomes brittle, so it can break easily on the hills. So, and if you are going to pull out the old stuff like that, making sure that you take it to a shop to have it looked at or inspected, just to make sure that the gear is in good working order on that. And that your skis and stuff are in good shape. Like, if making sure like your skis have brakes on the bindings, so if you do lose a ski, they don't torpedo down the hill. And the same as a snowboard now, with making sure there's a strap on it so it attaches to your lower leg to make sure that if you have to take it off for any reason, that it doesn't get away from you on that end of it. And having a good helmet on that, and making sure you have a good night's sleep and stuff before you go to the hill. And all that.
So are helmets mandatory on ski hills?
They're not mandatory as per se, but they're highly recommended. And some ski hills have it mandatory if you're going into the terrain parks or onto major features on that, like big jumps and that. So some resorts have it mandatory in those sections. But as for the rest of the hill, it's highly recommended.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Now, maybe somebody who wants to get started in skiing, bring the children out and have a family day at the hill. Could you talk a little about maybe best practices for how to dress for the ski hill?
Making sure like you're wearing warm gear, so a winter jacket, ski pants, mitts or gloves on that front. Try to stay away from wearing jeans and clothing that absorbs a lot of moisture on that front, and also having dressing in layers, so you're able to, if your body temperature goes up or goes down, that you can add a layer or remove a layer on that. And as well, the weather conditions of the day, like you go out in the morning, it could be very cool, and then it could warm up by midday if the sun starts coming out, and then by late afternoon the temperature could go colder again. So just being able to have that flexibility on that.
Yeah.
And then avoid wearing like long scarves or infinity scarves, where they could cause problems of getting caught in the lift and things like that. So try to avoid those kinds of things.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of moving people when you're at the ski hill. And certainly when you're a skier, it's not just about your own safety, but people around us who are skiing. Can you talk this would be maybe for someone that's new to the sport, maybe talk about slow zones and watching out for your fellow skier?
Yeah, so if you're going to a new hill, it's looking at the map systems and seeing what hills, because they're all with, like you mentioned earlier, black diamonds to green runs to blue runs. So making sure that you're skiing within your ability on that and not getting caught into a situation where you're not going to be able to make it down the hill safely on that. There's also lessons that you can take at the hill if you're new to the sport to give you those basic tips on getting used to your skis and being in control. Familiarize yourself with the chairlift, so being able to get on the chairlift and off the chairlift safely. And if you're not sure, you can always ask one of the lifties or check with a staff member, or some hills do have volunteers that help orient people around the hill on that part of it. And then when you're when you're out on the ski hill, if you stop, try not to stop in a blind zone or in the middle of a trail, trying to move off to the side of the runs on that. And if when you're merging back onto the hills or in the runs, making sure you're looking up the hill and down, and making sure that you're not cutting anyone off or going to run into anyone on that part. And try and refrain from smoking and consuming cannabis or alcoholic products during the day. Like wait till the end of the day to kind of get into that end of it, just to be safe and good for your free mind for you on the hill.
Yes, absolutely. That making sure that you're almost entering a freeway, kind of look both ways before you cross the street, that kind of idea. So let's talk about the actual sport. I know my favorite winter sport is downhill skiing. Do you have a preferred type of skiing?
Mine is downhill skiing. Like that's my prefer. I have done Nordic, but alpine is my forte and go-to on that part. So it's enjoyable sport.
Yeah, absolutely. What about backcountry skiing? Does your organization have tips for those people that are a little more adventurous?
For anything like along those lines, making sure that you're avalanche aware, knowing where you're going, having all the proper gear for backcountry, so your avalanche beacons and your probing poles, watching the weather, and talking to people out there, making sure that if you are going into backcountry, that you are being safe out there.
So, in your work as the volunteer rescue force on the hill, what are some of the common injuries that you may come across in a typical day?
For skiers, it could be like your like we call it a boot top fracture or break. So it's a twisting motion where because your ankle and foot is kind of stuck in a boot, so the twisting top will be a break right above the top of your boot line on those, or twisting in the knees for skiers. And when you get into more snowboarding, it's more the shoulders, like so dislocated shoulders or fractured collarbones, wrists. That's the way you fall, you stretch more on that part. And then with some of the resorts and hills getting more and more bigger features and jumps, some of the injuries now are becoming more impact injuries, so fractures on the heels because of the impact of the landing, or lower back compressions, things like that. And the big one as well is concussions. So just
Yeah.
hitting the ground a little too hard, or over jumping or overcompensating and losing that balance.
Yeah, there's definitely the injuries, I'm sure, run the gamut of what can happen. And I'm sure social media and other videos of things just kind of play into people becoming overwhelmed in some instances. Are there ways that you would recommend maybe injuries could be avoided or mitigated?
If you're going to start doing jumps and stuff, making sure you start off slow and at the smaller levels, and then working your way up to that and getting the comfortability. So don't just go at the end of the day and say, oh, I'm going to take this last run and take the biggest jump I can, where fatigue and everything else is kicking in, and chances are you're going to get injured more at that end of the day. And just work your way up to stuff. Always skiing in control, so that way you're in control, that you'll be able to stop in time of avoiding anything on that front.
Yeah, that makes sense. So if a skier is hurt, what's the best way for them to call for help when they're at the resort?
Well, nowadays with social or cell phones, everyone pretty much carries a cell phone on that. So a lot of the hills do have emergency phone numbers on their day passes or their season pass that they can call down to the main office and have ski patrol dispatched out to the injured person. If they don't have a cell phone, they can always ask someone skiing by or having a friend ski down to the bottom or try and flag down a patroller for help. And if possible, have someone stay with that person, the injured person as well, just to reassure them and just stay with them, that not do any first aid with them, but just a body to be next to them, just to keep kind of talking to them and keeping them calm, and ask them not to move, just because they're not sure what the injuries are.
It's great just to have first aid as a practice and part of our lives of having that course. But if someone's maybe more interested in the work that Canadian Ski Patrol does, is there a way to get involved in training courses?
Yeah, so there's our website. So there's the www.skipatrol.ca, where they can go on there and go into, if they look on the join section, they can see what the Ski Patrol is about, how to join, and then click on the zones that fits for their local zone area, because all across Canada, like I mentioned, there's different divisions and zones, and they'll be able to set you up with a zone that's closest to you to sign up and register in the patrol, or you can send an email as well, let them know that you're interested in becoming a patroller or trained in first aid, because it could be winter events or summer events now on that front, and then go from there.
Well, that sounds really interesting. And just before you go, I wanted to ask you just to talk a little bit about the ski hill where you are in the Yukon. You were mentioning that there's teams that are actually already doing their race training. Is that correct?
Yeah, so during the month of November, from early November to usually the first weekend of December, we'll have ski teams come up from all across Canada to practice, to do training. So it could be alpine to giant slalom. We have freestyle teams up here on that front. Sometimes we have the Paralympic athletes come up as well doing the training. This year we actually held the first FIS ski race up here. So we had teams from places from around the world on that. And then this weekend coming, we have the Canada Cup freestyle competition going on. So with the big air and freestyle competition. So it's a good resource for the hill, bringing up more teams, and it's a good resource for the community as well, because they're coming up here, staying in the hotels, and a good way for our hill to be open to the general public, usually by the beginning of December. So we know all the snow is up and running on that part. So it's a good influx for the hill.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. Can you talk a little bit about maybe if there's some parents watching who want to get their children involved in racing?
Most hills like this go onto the resorts and look on the websites for the racing teams or getting involved on that front of it. And then most times it's on the websites on that. So every hill is a bit different on that. Like sometimes, like up here, it's basically from our hill. But I know other provinces and stuff will have their own ski clubs throughout the provinces that you can get involved in.
Yeah, it's a great pastime and a great family event to head out to the hills for the week. Ken, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us to talk about our favorite winter sport.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, our pleasure. That was Ken Howard, the VP Risk Safety Officer, Mountain Division, with the Canadian Ski Patrol. For more information about the Canadian Ski Patrol, you can visit their website at skipatrol.ca.